and gentlemen, joining us from South Africa, here is the Boxing Lockdown. It's showtime.
Welcome to another episode of the Boxing Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk. The two gentlemen are in the Zoom house, and when you talk about fights and fighters getting cuts and fighters being saved in a fight, you got to think of a legendary cut man. And you got to think of the one and only Jacob Stitch Duran, and he joins us right here on the Boxing Lockdown. Stitch, welcome to the Boxing Lockdown.
Hey, man, with an intro like that, how could I not? Appreciate it. It's good talking to you guys. And, I'm on lockdown here at the MGM in Las Vegas, but we'll talk about that as the show goes on.
Stitch, I want to get right into it. I want to talk about your first – well, I don't want to talk about your entry into boxing because we'll get into that. Your first introduction to being in the corner with a big cut. And I'm sure you remember the fight, and I'm sure you remember the fighter. Tell us that fight, the fighter's name, and what was going through your mind at that moment when you were dealing with your first cut in your career.
Well, my first cut, that's going way back, but I think my first big maybe the one you're talking about is Raul Marquez when he fought Keith Mullins. That's when Raul was the IBF super middleweight or middleweight champion, fought Keith Mullins, and ended up with 5 big cuts, one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, something like 70 stitches altogether. And I had just moved to Las Vegas, so that was my coming out fight in Las Vegas. I come from a kickboxing background, and people didn't know who I was, and I could wrap good hands and I could work cuts, and that one was my coming out party in Las Vegas. Raul Marquez defended his world title, and it was nice.
Stitch, looking at your career, have you ever? How many times? Okay, I'm sure it's happened quite often, but describe to us the feeling where you've dealt with a cut and then the fighter comes back from a serious cut and he wins the fight, like especially in a big fight. What's the feeling in your mind knowing that you've done so much in a fight that you could have lost, but because you dealt with a cut?
Well, that's a good question, man, and it's of course it's a good feeling. Our job is to give that fighter that one more round, but situations like that, and we're all men, right? And we're all gladiators, but these guys, it's nice when they give you a kiss on the cheek and tell you they love you, because you made a difference in their career. So I've done that quite a few times, gotten quite a few kisses, and that's what makes my job entertaining. That's what makes it fun, is that behind the scenes stuff that the normal fan doesn't get to see. But these guys are they're warriors, and just to have a part of their piece of their life in your hands makes a big difference. I've had mothers and fathers, wives come up to me and thank me. So it's very rewarding.
You mentioned right in the beginning of the interview that you had a boxing and kickboxing background, so you had a bit of both. This is even before you started being a cut man. You had a school. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, it goes way, way, way back actually to 1974. Even before that, 1972, I joined the military. I was in the Air Force, and I was a young kid. I grew up as a farm worker, and picking tomatoes and peaches and cotton and apricots. And I tell people, if you ate it, I'd probably pick it for you, right? So I joined the military, and in 1974, they stationed me in a place called Thailand. It's the end of the Vietnam War, and shit, I didn't even know what Thailand was, brother. And I saw my first Muay Thai fight, and that next Monday, on the base for the GIs, the soldiers, they had Taekwondo. So at Taekwondo, Thailand, to me, it sounds like the same. So I started with the Koreans, and for about 3 months, and then they left, and then the Thais took over and kind of transitioned us into the Muay Thai system with Taekwondo and all that. And then when I got back to the States, I opened up my own school of kickboxing, and that's what got me where I'm at now.
Stitch, honestly, you have to be probably the most famous cut man in the world right now. But the nickname Stitch, you got to tell us that story, because we know there's a story behind the nickname Stitch.
Yeah, nicknames, you never give them to yourself, right? The honor of getting a nickname when somebody gives it to you. Well, on my days when I was working with kickboxers, Dennis Alexio was the actually light heavyweight champ of the world. Great kickboxer in those days. And his sparring partner, Dave Rooney. Well, Dennis Alexio had a fight that night, and Dave Rooney was in the undercard. And, of course, I worked his corner. And knowing what I know now, he ended up with a cut. But I used to see, because growing up, the old cutman wouldn't show you what, quote unquote, were the secrets. So you had to kind of learn on your own, but just observing other guys that would get little pieces of tape and they would butterfly them. So I did that to Dave Rooney, and he says, man, you send me some stitches, I'm going to call you Stitch. And that's where the name came from. So Dave Rooney, I haven't seen him since those days. Somebody tells me he's a fisherman up in Alaska, but I don't think that he knows to this day how he changed and patterned my life. But that's where the name came from. And it's funny because I'm here for the top rank fights at the MGM, and this guy asked me just a while ago, what's your first name? So people don't know my first name.
You talk about other cutmen not wanting to share their secrets. Can you remember a time maybe way back when you were still trying to learn, and then you sort of maybe made him when something went wrong?
Oh, I got a great one for you, brother. I was learning how to be a cut man, right? I was still learning, and I was as green as shit. And so I go to a boxing show in Richmond, California. Bone Crusher Smith is fighting Marvis Frazier. And one of the fights earlier, the guy did a nice job on the cuts. So I go up to him as a dummy, and I said, look, I'm trying to learn to be a cut man. Can you tell me what you did? And he says, fuck you. He goes, I'm taking this to my grave, and you got to learn like me. And he walked away. And I felt about this big, brother, but that just reinforced my beliefs that to go out there and help others, to teach others, right? And so that's kind of turned a negative into a positive. But now I go back to Oakland, California with Andre Ward. That's where we're from originally, and he's fighting there. And, well, who wants to take a picture? Him and his son. So he forgot about it. I never did. It just encouraged me to go forward and continue doing what I'm doing, you know. And with all these interviews that I've done, I've mentioned that story many, many times, but I've never thrown his name out there. It wasn't important. It just, it was a lesson learned not to be like this guy.
I want to talk occupationally, because a lot of people will look at different occupations in life and, you know, look at a cut man. Can you be a full-time cut man, you know, growing up through the system, or is it not necessarily conducive?
Yeah, it's not. You know, I get messages all the time from doctors, paramedics, nurses, EMTs, anybody. They ask about what it takes to be a cut man. And I tell them, first and foremost, you know, number one, you got to spend hours and days and weeks and months and years in the gym. You got to be a participant to understand the body functions, the mental game, everything that these fighters go through. And during that process, you're wrapping hands, you know, with your own expenses and all that. But I also tell everybody, if you do it for the money, you're doing it for the wrong reasons, because it's not what you would consider a full-time job. I'm one of the few, probably a handful, that could say I could do it full-time. But it's, you know, it hasn't been like that forever. And maybe the last 10 years, I've been able to do this full-time. So it's not a job for if you think you're going to, you know, go out there and make a lot of money, because you got to build up your clientele, number one, and it's all done through performance. So, nah, it's not a full-time job, brother, for a lot of people.
Stitch, have you ever been in a situation early on in your career where you were maybe a little bit green, working a cut, couldn't stop the blood, couldn't stop the flow of blood, the fighter lost, and you think back years later, I wish I could have that one fight over, I could have made a big difference now? What fight was it, and how were you feeling at that moment in time?
Yeah, no, there's, you know, there's fights that have been stopped because of cuts that are real severe. So in that aspect, no, you know, that's a good question. But I've never felt like, you know what, I didn't give it my best. Unfortunately, you know, he got cut. You know, it's going to happen. They understand, you know, so that situation, I've been pretty fortunate to say it hasn't happened, you know, so I've been blessed. But yeah, when the fighter loses and, you know, he has a cut, you got to work on it. You know, there's that emotion that goes with taking care of these guys. And the same with the, you know, thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, you know, so you got to be with them through thick and thin. But no, I've been blessed to say I've done a pretty good job, bro.
You mentioned Andre Ward. With Andre Ward, he was a guy who didn't suffer a lot of cuts in his career.
Right.
Have you ever had a situation where you look at certain fights and you think, this guy, being in this guy's corner, there won't be too much work to be done, or is it just focus all the time?
No, you know, it's so many times. I mean, you have good questions, man. so many times guys say, oh yeah, I never get cut. And then I get some work, right? So I, with all fighters, Andre Ward and, everybody, I always prepare for the worst case scenario. So, all it takes is a headbutt. All it takes is an elbow, MMA, a kick, a knee, anything, ground and pound. So I always prepare for the worst case scenario. And if I don't get no work, then I don't get no work. I'm like an insurance policy. If you drive a Maserati or Ferrari, then your insurance goes up a little bit. Well, I'm that insurance guy.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about, because obviously you with Bellator now, and you're helping out with their events. I mean, MMA, you almost every fight you sort of have something through.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
I said with MMA as opposed to boxing, because sometimes boxing you can get away with cuts if there's no head clashes, if there's no sweet punches landed.
Right.
It's almost all the time that cuts are had. Do you find yourself really getting your money's worth in MMA?
Yeah, of course. That's it's a cut man's dream to work MMA. But now I'm also working bare knuckle fights here in the United States. The first legal fight since like 1886. So bare knuckle fights is a new sport, but it's literally 60-70% cut ratio with fighters coming in. So I get a lot of work through MMA, and I get a lot of work through boxing and or through MMA and bare knuckle fighting. Boxing, man, I could do a fight and eat popcorn at the same time.
Stitch, the one thing I admire about you in the corner is that you very rarely, in fact, you don't give any advice. And I've got to give you so much respect for that, because so many guys don't know their place. Now, the question that I'm going to ask you might be a little controversial, and I certainly don't want you to name the trainer if so, but I want you to think back when you were working a corner where you heard the trainer giving the advice, because you've been around boxing a very long time. Were you working a cut, or you putting Vaseline or putting grease on the fighter's face, and you listen to this advice that the trainer's giving, and you think, oh my God, this trainer hasn't a clue what he's talking about?
Yeah, it's happened. And you're right. My job is not to give instructions. But like Vladimir Klitschko, I don't say anything, but when I do say something, he knows that it's the truth, and he'll adhere to it. But yeah, I've worked some corners, bro, where the whole team is horrible, and I try to put them together. Look, man, here's what you got to do. Here's what you have to do. So, it's not fair to the fighter to come in with a team that's not qualified to take care of the fighter. And there was an instance, even Andre Duran fought Jose. That's when he got hit, remember? All right, well, on the rematch, Virgil Hunter, which is a great trainer, was sick. I didn't know how sick he was. He ended up spending like 2-3 months in the hospital after this fight. But during the fight, he wasn't 100% into the game. And I'm telling him, I said, look, Andre Durrell's getting hit with some power shots. He might want to consider stopping the fight, Well, kind of one ear and out the other. And so I took it upon myself that when I'm working on Andre Ward, this is like Andre Durrell, this is like in the 8th round. I said, look, man, the doctors are thinking of stopping the fight. Do you want to continue? And he goes a slight no. And with that, I stopped the fight. And Virgil Hunter didn't know what was going on. No, one more round. I said, no. Once you tell me no, you're done. And those were the kind of shots that what I consider is long-term injuries that would give you the punch-drunk syndrome, the dementia pugilistica, right? So if you remember the fight before, his uncle went and cracked the opponent, and he got barred for life. Well, he's the first one to call me and said, you did a great job. The next morning, Andre Durrell and his wife called me, and they thanked me personally for stopping the fight, because he says, I just didn't have nothing in me. I didn't know what to do. But thank you very much, Stitch. I love you. So through my experience, of course, I let the teams kind of dictate everything. But if I know there's a time and a place where it's important for me to say something or do something, then I'll step up and I'll do that. And that was a good example right there.
You've done movies as well. What's that like? I mean, I know it's probably very different from regular fights, but what is it like?
I'm sorry, do it again. You came in broken a little bit.
Movies.
Oh, yeah.
Movies.
Right.
Yeah. What's that like?
You got to be there, brother. I got to get you on the next one. It's a blessing, I've been in 6 movies, and I've never been, I'm not one to say, hey, man, I want to be in a movie. They've called me to play myself, which is even better. But there's nothing like it, bro. To work with Michael B. Jordan one-on-one for 6 weeks at a time. I was yesterday. Who do you know has been in 3 movies with Sylvester Stallone? I did Balboa when Rocky fought his last fight. I did Creed 1, Creed 2. I've done Ocean's 11 when Vladimir Klitschko fought Lennox Lewis. That's when I first started with Vladimir Klitschko, and then after that, I started working with him. I did one with Kevin James, MMA movie, Here Comes the Boom. And then the first one I did was Play It to the Bone with Woody Harrelson and Antonio Banderas. So, yeah, I've been blessed, bro. I'm not an actor. Never said I was an actor. If they asked me to act, I wouldn't be able to do it, but an honor in itself.
Now, of course, you've done a lot of big fights, but more recently, I want to go into you got called up by the Tyson Fury camp to do the second fight between him and Deontay Wilder. When it comes to big stages like that, and obviously, getting maybe connected to the fight, you nervous for him going into that fight?
Once again, you guys are coming in broken a little bit. I'm sorry. But you were talking about Tyson Fury, and what was it like to do the fight?
And were you nervous for him, though?
No, not at all. Those days of being nervous are gone. I've done so many fights at the high level, but the adrenaline is still there, and the adrenaline is what we live for. And I was making mention how I'm in the dressing room with Tyson Fury in the camp, and hola, what's up, man? Oh, ¿cómo estás, bro? And un placer. También muchas gracias. Aquí vamos. So it's nice because in the dressing room you see Tyson Fury. He's as relaxed as could be and everything, and then he puts his cape on and his crown, and then we walk out, and then they tell the corner guys, well, you guys go up to the ring and wait for him for the walk-in, right? Well, I didn't know they were going to put him in a throne, right? And when I see him walking out or sitting on the top of a throne like a king, man, my adrenaline just kind of went up to the sky. I said, yeah, this is fantastic. This is what I do and why I do it. But working with him was tremendous, man. I mean, such a good kid. The whole team were very, very good. And just to be part of that team under such a big event like that was instrumental for me.
Stitch, I want to talk to you about your brand. And it's a brand that I've actually supported. I got your card in Macau, and obviously love your stuff, the Q-tips and the band for all the Q-tips and so forth. How's your brand doing, and who came up with the idea to create your own boxing brand for cuts and corner work?
Well, I did. I've always been, I consider myself, I worked for a major corporate company, sales and marketing, RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company, for 23 years. So I understand the sales and marketing aspect, but I've always been a hustler. Right, and I've never been scared to go out and try something, but I just saw like the KO swell. All right, very, very simple, because you look at all the end swells, they're all flat, and when you put them on, they're cold direct pressure, right? Well, it never made sense to me, because a majority of the swelling is the cheeks or the eyebrows, and those are contoured. So I woke up in the middle of the night one time, and I kind of sketched it out, and the next day I went and bought me some clay, and I made a model of it. And that's the KO swell, where it's curved on one side and then it's flat on the other in case you need it. So you have 2 instead of 1. The tape, it just happened. The guy that had the original owner from with the war tape, I helped him out, and then they ended up burning him. And I said, why not come up with my own name? Why would I support them? I'll just use my own name, and the product's going great. It's pretty awesome. I've never done it more for the money. I've done it more to give people proper equipment. And, of course, it's worked out great. I teamed up with Juan Ramirez, Cutman for Hire, Supplies.com, because I was selling my own tape during the weekends. I'd be traveling, and let's say you ordered tape, right? And you wanted it by so-and-so. Well, I'm gone. So literally through a dream, I woke up.
So you mean you would drive a flight to South Africa to give me some tape, Stitch?
Well, if you would have asked for you, of course, at least meet you in Macau, But the thing is to get that tape out as soon as possible. So I woke up literally with a dream, and I said, Juan, how would you be interested in carrying my product? Of course, man. He was all ecstatic with that, and now he carries my product. So Cutman for Hire Supplies.
You've dealt with big fights and big fights. Usually, the heavyweights fights are usually some of the biggest fights. Um, you've worked in the Klitschko's corner, the Klitschko brothers' corner, and Tyson Fury. What is that like? Like in terms of atmosphere? Like I know the Klitschko sports a lot in Germany, and so
Yeah,
the
hey,
atmosphere.
I tell you, the Klitschko's of all the people I've worked with had the most outstanding performances ever. I mean, just the promotions themselves. You know, going to Germany, a lot of times their shows were in 50,000 seat arenas and very very nice classic things. But no, it's a blessing. Not only in boxing but also in MMA. Go to Japan for the Pride fights. The big arenas, and it's a pleasure to be part of that.
I wanted to ask you, and obviously it happened a long time ago, was yourself and Dana White obviously didn't end on the best of terms. I wanted to ask now if anything has changed.
No, Dana who? Yeah, no, no. But I tell you what, man, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Like I said, growing up as a farm worker, we always fought against unfair practices. Literally, we had planes that were spraying pesticides next to the crops we were working on. It just a lot of unfair things, and my parents were always against. We're always trying to fight against fair practices for people of our caliber, right? So when they took away our sponsors, I thought about those moments with my parents and what would they do, and literally the interview that I did, what had happened is John Nash from Bloody Elbow called me and asked if I'd be interested in doing an interview on how the Reebok deal affected the cutmen. And of course, I went back to my days as a farm worker. So the interview was very politically correct, but I guess maybe the timing wasn't good for the UFC because it's like I threw a gallon of gasoline on the fire and just exploded. And I got reviewed or messages from all over the world, and to the point where my friend called me, and we're all friends at that time. And the only thing he said is, because of the interview you did about Reebok, the UFC is not going to use you no more. And I'm getting a shitload of messages. And the first text that I read, I respond back to the guy that UFC let me go for speaking out about the Reebok deal. Now I got to look for another job. And that went viral. I think I did like 57 interviews in a week. I had camera crews coming to my house and the whole work. So I got my sponsors back, getting a lot more work than I had before. And Dana's in the past, man. He's that day. But I got to give him credit because he's the one that brought me in. So respect for that, but he's the one that took me out.
Stitch, I want to cast your mind back to 2015. Vladimir Klitschko, Tyson, a massive underdog, and you see this fight unfolding before your eyes, and you think to yourself, man, Vladimir's not winning this fight. He's really, really not winning this fight. It's not going our way. What was going into your mind in the end of the 11th round, going into the 12th round, knowing that you've got an emotional connection to Vladimir based on your career with him? What was going through your mind at that moment in time?
That was with Anthony Joshua?
No, Tyson Fury.
Oh, yeah. When I met Tyson Fury, it's like 2 weeks before the fight, right? That was a good point. But I told him, I said, when Vladimir fought you, I thought Vladimir had a bad day. And he did. But then I saw, because I knew nothing about Tyson Fury. But then I saw Tyson Fury fight Deontay Wilder, and his style of fighting to me was so unorthodox that it was highly effective. And that's the same. I said, so he beat him through his style that Vladimir wasn't prepared for. But I think we were all shocked that Vladimir Klitschko lost to Tyson Fury. And, and Tyson said, well, I hadn't fought in 3 years. I was out drinking. I'm doing this. But I knew when he fought Deontay Wilder that same style was going to beat Deontay Wilder. And I told people all along that Deontay Wilder had one chance of winning, and that was with a knockout. And Tyson Fury had two chances of winning, a knockout or going to decision. But if it went to decision, then guaranteed he was going to win it.
With all your work, I'm sure like it's all just about every weekend with MMA, bare knuckle fighting and boxing. How much time do you have on your own, like to sit down and actually watch fights?
Not too often. I'm here at the MGM with the Top Rank fights. And I literally, I just got checked in last night again, but I'll be here from Sunday through Thursday night. They have fights on Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? But we're on lockdown. We're in isolated lockdown. But I went home over the weekend and I got to see the fights only because I had a little bit of time. But not too often. You know, that's why recording them is great. I'll get to watch some of it here, maybe some of it there. But, you know, I definitely, the fights that I've worked, I'll try to follow up on them and see what I did good, see what I did wrong, and just kind of study. I'm always studying. But even other fights, I always study the corners. I study the cut man, whether it's a 4-rounder, 12-rounder, whatever. I'm always trying to learn and adapt.
So you mentioned now that you're there for the Tuesday and Thursday fights, and I wanted to ask you, what's the mood like around the MGM Grand? What's the feeling like? Obviously, you can't have fans there, so the hype sort of can't be there. So what is the sort of, how is it?
Brother, we're in lockdown, man. It's a very nice high-end prison, literally. You know, they top floor of the MGM, which is the top floor, but the only ones are there are just the participants in these shows. We're away from the public. I got in last night. They tested me again, and I have to stay in my room until I get the approval. But everything is literally just isolated, just with the staff of Top Rank, the staff of ESPN, and the participants. And then we all have to wear masks all the time. But you know, it's history in the making, and I'm glad to be part of it because what we're doing here is literally the blueprint for boxing promotions all over the world during this pandemic. You know, so just to be part of that is I'm glad to be here. But it's fun, but it's not a lot of fun. You know, I'd rather be home with my wife and my family. But I understand that this is an important process of my history.
Stitch, you've had a lot of memorable moments in the corner, but the one moment that stands out for you in your career and why?
Man, I say pick a fighter, brother. Yeah, but no, I'll tell you, there's a lot of good moments. You know, a lot of great moments. But this one has to go to MMA. Vanderlei Silva is fighting Chuck Liddell. Two great fighters, right? And I've known Vanderlei Silva from when I used to go to Pride in Japan and all that. And in fact, all the Brazilians gave me the nickname Santana. So about a week before the fights, I see Vanderlei Silva, and I tell him, I said, look, man, it's my birthday is that day. I want to give you good karma. Happy birthday, brother, you know, and I leave him. So it turns out that I'm working with Chuck Liddell. But this fight right here, guys, these guys are cracking each other where you could hear every punch. Probably the hardest fight both these guys have ever been to. And I'm working on Chuck Liddell, and, you know, he gets a cut, and I clean him up. And after the fights, and I clean up Chuck Liddell, then I go up to Vanderlei Silva, and Leon Tabs, the other cut man's working on him, and he's swollen, you know, and I'm looking at him, and I say, Vanderlei, how do you feel? You go, oh, Steve, I'm okay. And then after all this hard fight, he looks at me, and in the middle of the ring, he says, Steve, happy birthday. I said, man, what an honor, you know. So I've had a lot of great moments like this, you know. The boxing, you know, Vitaly Klitschko says, you know, Steve, if you were with me when I fought Lennox Lewis, I would have won the fight. So, you know, those little things like that make a big difference. And tons of stories, bro. We got to sit down and have a couple beers and just talk stories, man, because I got a shitload of them, and they're all true, you know. I mean, Fedor Emelianenko, you know, going into MMA, when I wrapped his hands in Japan for the first time, he's not speaking to me. Russians don't say a lot anyway, right? And when I wrap hands, I try to speak to the guys and relax them, and Fedor ain't saying shit to me. And finally I finished. I said, okay, how do they feel? He goes, super. Brother, I was the happiest guy in the world, man. I didn't even charge him no money. I walked out. My feet weren't even touching the carpet. And we became friends after that. So a lot of great memories, a lot of great moments.
Have you ever been in a situation where you have to pick which corner you have to work in? Say if you've got you link to both fighters, and then you have to pick which corner you want to work in?
Well, it happens all the time, you know. But what, like in MMA, the promoter will put us in a certain corner. So whoever the fighter is in that corner is the one we'll work with. But there's been many times where I'll wrap your hands and then I'll wrap your opponent's hands, and it just happens that I'm working with your opponent. But as Vitor Belfort says, you know, he says, when I see Stitch walking into the dressing room, even though I know he's working the opposite corner, he brings that calming effect, right? And I think those are some of the things that, you know, I bring value in. Frank Mir, another UFC fighter, says, when I see Stitch walking into the dressing room, my stomach just drops because I know it's time to fight. You know, so, yeah, of course, you know, there's some guys that some trainers have called me, you know, like a week before the fight. That's in MMA. And they, Stitch, can you work my corner? I said, look, you got to talk to the promoter because I'm neutral. I'm trying to be neutral, but there's some guys that I do like. You know, it's just that bond that you have with these guys. But for the most part, I'll leave it up to the promoter. Okay.
I just wanted to speak about, obviously, in your position, you've been able to travel the world and sort of get around. It's sort of one of the privileges that comes with being as good as you are. But what I wanted to ask you was, have you ever been in a situation where you've been in an uncomfortable one?
Yeah, you know, I was, and I'll tell you the story. And I've never told this story, but I'll tell you. But it was Diego Corrales when he fought Jose. Hold on, somebody wants to take a picture with me, man. Look. Orale.
Power stuff.
Gracias. How you doing? So what happened? Yeah, it's tough. I'll answer this because I've never mentioned it before, but I thought it was kind of a chicken shit move. But Diego Corrales, when he fought Jose Luis Castillo, the second fight, remember? So in the first fight, Joe Goosen, the trainer, was a cut man, and he did both things, which at the high level you shouldn't. You should have a cut man. You should have a trainer. So he ended up getting swollen, and James Prince was his manager. So James Prince brought me in for the second fight. And I remember at the weigh-ins, I told Joe Goosen, I said, hey, man, we're going to be working together. He said, no, we're not. No, we're not, you know. So James Prince said, yeah, you are. You know? So anyway, here's where the bad part came. When I was in the dressing room, I never felt so bad in my whole life because the coach, Joe Goosen, didn't say one word to me throughout the whole event. Not one word. And I felt like I was unwanted there, for sure. You know, so that was a moment that, you know, I just kind of chalked that in. But now I see him, and he comes up and shakes my hand, you know. And but that's a moment I never forgot. You know, you can't work on egos here. You got to work on the highest percentage probabilities of giving your fighter every chance to win a fight. And have a cut man to work with you side by side is another one. So that's a good story, man. I've never told that one, and hope nobody ever asks me again. Yeah, hold on, wait. We got one more. It's okay. All right. You go ahead and ask the question, guys.
Stitch, I want to cast your mind back, and you're obviously a boxing fan from the old school as well. Pick one fighter that you could be with that wasn't in your era, that you would have loved to have worked in his team and in the corner, and why?
Well, there's two fighters, of course. Roberto Duran, one of my favorites, and not that my last name is Duran, but that helps. But him and Alexis Arguello, I think, are two fighters that I would have loved to work with in the past. But you know, being you guys are from South Africa, right? Francois Botha, I worked with both Mike Tyson, and what they did is they brought me in to do the hand pads because I was a trainer outside of being a cut man. I was a trainer before I was a cut man. So they brought me in to do pads for Botha, and I remember the first day that we're doing pads, his coordination was horrible, and boom, he punched me right here. But my shoulder was hurting so bad before that. I couldn't lift my arm up, right? That's from doing a lot of pads, and at that point, I was thinking about having surgery. And then they called me to work with Botha, and I said, well, you know what? I need the money. I'm in pain anyway. I'm going to do it. So I'm doing pads with Botha, and the second day I go home and shit, my arm feels great, man. So it must have been tweaked, and he hit me so hard that he untweaked it, you know. And but it was nice, man. So that was the only time I've ever worked with an African fighter.
Have you ever looked at a fight and thought it would be nice working with this guy maybe sometime in the future?
Yeah, you know, it's always, you know, you look at some guys and you look at them and say, God, you know, it sure would be nice to work with him. love to work with Lomachenko, just for the style of fighting that he has. But yeah, of course, but I'm not one to be, everything that I've gotten to this point, I swear I've never asked for one job. And that's a tradition I want to continue doing this. But yeah, if I had some guys I'd like to work with, yeah, it'd be nice, but I'll wait for the phone call. So.
You said earlier in the interview that you sometimes you get attached to boxers and you have sort of favorites. Would you be able to say who your favorites?
Yeah, well, Vladimir Vitaly Klitschko, no doubt. Fall up on top is just classic guys, totally favorite guys, and but there's just so many that you have a bond to. A lot of guys in the MMA industry, I have a nice bond to. But yeah, there's that little relationship that you have where that you're going to be friends forever. And let me tell you a quick story about Vladimir when he fought with Anthony Joshua. Biggest fight at that time before Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. 90,000 people at Wembley Stadium. So I didn't see Vladimir till the weigh-ins because I had gotten into town Thursday. I was in Crete. My daughter got married. So I see Vladimir and Vitaly in the weigh-ins, and we're in the dressing room before he gets on the scale. And I put my hand on Vladimir, and I say, "Oh, Vladimir, don't worry about nothing. I'm going to take care of tomorrow. I'm going to take care of you like you're my son." And I leave. So here I am right before Michael Buffer does the announcements. I'm putting the final Vaseline on Vladimir Klitschko, and we're maybe 8 inches away. And he tells me in front of the whole world, nobody could hear it but me. He says, "You could call me son." But, that gave me chills because I knew that statement I had given him the night before calmed him down during the times when he's thinking about the fights. Because, fight of the night before, all kinds of things are going through their head and the nervousness. And I guess, that resonated in his mind for him to say, "You could call me son." And then he called me the week after and, "Hey, daddy," so those are moments, very, very special moments that you can't write. You gotta experience them.
Stitch, it's been absolutely magic having you on the show here at the Boxing Lockdown in South Africa. It's your last parting shots for the viewers that are watching this.
Yeah, man, you guys stay tuned. You guys have a good show. I've only told you a small part of my stories. We got to do it again some other time, but look forward to going to Africa one of these days. I almost went there with kickboxing up in Cape Town, South Africa, but that got canceled. So one of these days, maybe go to your hometown and I'll bring you some tape.
Absolutely. The one and only Jacob Stitch Duran right here on the Boxing Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk. This has been an epic show. We will see you again soon.